Welcome to Radio Sensation. I'm your host, Dan, and in this episode, I'm going to be looking at the book Paul Bunyan, Invention of an American Legend. Okay, so this book, Paul Bunyan, The Invention of an American Legend, is basically, it's another one of those, this is actually a kid's book. It's basically talking about of course, there's something terrible behind this myth. It's not, because it's really, we talk about American legend. America's legends are pretty lame. Johnny Appleseed, come on. And even this, the only thing I really knew, I grew up in Pennsylvania. Paul Bunyan was not a big deal there. I guess the Midwest is where kids really learned a lot about him. The only reason I knew about him was there was a Disney cartoon that was made, and actually there was another cartoon that kind of made fun of him. I can't remember who did that. But anyway, so I really didn't grow up thinking anything great about Paul Bunyan. But the fact is that this book is basically a way to get to the idea of the deforestation of America and the way it messed up, this massive deforestation that happened so quickly. And it talks about the impact it had on wildlife. Of course, Native Americans who lived in the forests where these trees were all cut down, they had to be displaced for that. So there's things in here about that. In the back, they're talking about maybe we should be looking at these Native American folk tales and dropping Paul Bunyan. Instead of Paul Bunyan, let's talk about these Native American. I don't know. Again, Paul Bunyan was not anything for our schools. I think there was probably, I've seen a book or two over the years, but definitely wasn't a big deal for us. So I don't know that this needs to actually be a counterpoint. On the other hand, there's some really freaky Native American legends that are pretty cool. So if you if we want to make more books about Native American legends, I'm all for it. But that's just part of this book. The main part of it is Noah Van Shiver is one of my favorite cartoonists. I love his style, and he does a lot of different things. Not everything he does is he does a lot of work. It's funny. I saw his YouTube channel. He was talking about how little he thinks he produces, but geez, that Joseph Smith and the Mormons book he did, I tried to read that. I couldn't penetrate it. It's huge, and it's Joseph Smith and the Mormons. I couldn't grasp a way to get my interest to keep going through it. But he does a lot of great stuff, and his art's really great. But so here it is. He wants to tell the story about Paul Bunyan, and the thing is that there were the same way that people have to make up stories, heroic stories about soldiers to have them go off to war and stuff. Lumberjacking was an incredibly dangerous job. And one of the ways to get guys to do it is to appeal to their sense of the macho. So there were all these tall tales, I guess, that you would say about this lumberjack or that lumberjack. And so the guy who created Paul Bunyan was in charge of advertising for a big lumber company, and he wanted to come up with the greatest lumberjack of all, and he was going to represent their lumber company. So that's the truth of it. Now, the way Noah Shiver looks at this is, this actually really would make a great kind of Disney type opening to a film. because here he is. Here's the guy who represents the companies and is going to come up with Paul Bunyan. He's riding along with a lumberjack, one of the guys who's helped cut the forest down, but he's complaining because he's going like, well, you guys have taken all the fun out of lumberjacking. You're cutting down too much, too fast, and blah, blah, blah. He doesn't really sound much better. But at one point, the train that they're traveling on, they're going cross country, and the train has to stop. And so the people take the opportunity to get out of the train and stretch their legs. And while they're doing that, this guy can't help going like, ooh, I'd love to be cutting down all these trees. But the people are sitting around this little fire they've built, and they start talking about lumberjack stories. And, they're talking about who heard about the toughest, this and that. Now, the conceit is that, this did not have, this guy didn't come up with this on the fly like this. But the conceit is that he's seeing how much the people love these things. Like, here's one, he's talking about this, George was magical. He sold his soul to the devil. George was a large man with 2 sets of teeth. He could bite through a 2x4 board. His axe would chop timber all by itself. So he hears them, all these stories. And so he's trying to come up with it. He's supposedly coming up with the legend of Paul Bunyan on the spot to entertain these people. And so it goes through the Paul Bunyan legend. And it's just great storytelling, just great artwork. Noah's terrific. The other lumber guy who doesn't like the big company is like, well, phooey, but everyone else is eating it up. So he goes on and on about Babe, and there's the big blue ox, and he pretty much goes through everything that I remember from the Disney cartoon, which is, like I said, that's pretty much the only thing I know about Paul Bunyan, because it just wasn't a big thing. There's poor Babe. I don't remember that from the Disney thing where Babe eats something that has his guts burnt out. But so anyway, he comes up with the whole story of Paul Bunyan. Now it's time to get back on board the train. And this guy starts making him sweat a little bit, talking about how terrible the deforestation is. These stories you tell sound folksy and can sure entertain people, but if you spent your youth in lumber camps, then you know the truths. And so there it talks about the westward expansion and how much forest land was destroyed and how many people were displaced. And then it goes into this. So, there's a Native American legend about that came up. It's not really a legend because it's, Paul Bunyan is not really a legend. I mean, it hasn't been around long enough. But the Native Americans had a story about a giant Indian, a Native American rather, who fights Paul Bunyan and beats him up. So anyway, so that's it. The book is really interesting. It's a lot of fun. And like I said, I love Noah's artwork. I don't, it kind of feels like a book that's a little late in the day because I don't think kids learn about Paul Bunyan anymore. Now, in Minnesota, I take it, which is where one of the people who writes a story in this, he talks about how he has to talk to his students about Paul Bunyan. Because I guess there's still Paul Bunyan advertising and stuff. He's still on billboards and stuff like that, advertising pancakes or whatever. But I really don't know if too many people are going to know who remember Paul Bunyan. But there you have it. It's a really fun book. Like I said, it's meant for kids, but it's really well illustrated, well written, and the backstory about the writing of the legend and the Native American folk tales. It's all terrific stuff. So I think the book is a lot of fun.